Hello everyone, I'm DKashhistory, and today we're going to be going over a quick little history of the siege of Boston. Some little information. It was a 11-month siege of the city of Boston, Massachusetts. I can't say that. Oh well. So let's get into this. My little notes. So if you hear a bunch of paper, that's why. So, siege of Boston started right after the Battle of Lexington and Concord. That's my last video. I'm going to put the little thing up the top right corner. So they're going down, they get here, and they kind of take a boat and get to Boston. So there's all the British, all stationed in Boston, and then we have the Americans. They come in here, and they just kind of put a whole siege line, shut this entire little area here, so you have the little land area to get to Charlestown, and they're also blocking off Boston for any British supplies. However, you may notice they don't have anything here at the water, so that did allow British supplies and boats to get into the harbor. They also then had defenses put around. They fortified 4 hills around this entire thing. This one, you have this hill, I believe it was Breed's Hill, and Dorchester Heights. All these were fortified. I could be wrong though. My notes, I couldn't find really much about these 4 hills. This is what I'm assuming, because these are the few hills I can see on my map. You also had basically restricted movement into and out of Boston. So the British didn't want any arms getting into Boston in case there's some sort of rebellion inside of Boston. They also didn't want any arms to be coming out back to the colonists at the time. Eventually, they actually had a bunch of people a bunch of citizens turn in muskets into the city of Boston. So, I will be making a whole other video about this, Fort Ticonderoga. It's a interesting little battle, but it's not for a little while. I have a few more videos I want to make before this one, and I wanted to do this one its full justice and make a whole separate video. So, it's 21st of May, 1775. You can see there's still a siege line kind of built up around that whole area. So, Boston, they need either fresh meat, because there's a city. It's not like they have countryside areas. So, and they also need hay. So they were told they want to go out to Grape Island, which is down here. It's not on this map. And they had a barn with hay, with 80 tons of hay. And then the colonists heard about this, so they went, and they also went to this Grape Island. And they basically, so when the British got there, they were under fire from the colonists. And instead of getting their 80 tons of hay they need for their horses, they actually only got less than 3 tons. So, again, it's only the same deal about the Battle of Bunker Hill. I'm going to put that one as its own separate video. If you're watching after this, I'm probably going to link those up in the little right-hand corner again. So this is the end of July 1775, and there was about 2,000 more American troops, or riflemen, coming up from Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. And they didn't really have rifles in New England, so this was a new thing. So the British kind of underestimated them. There's the flag, there's that. So, the 30th of July, 1775, for retaliation of an American attack, because, under siege, they're constantly going back and forth. The British pushed back, and they burnt down a few houses in this little town right here, and they turned back and went back to Boston once they got pushed back out by the Americans. So, the 2nd of August, 1775, murder of Milo. There you go. So, an American rifleman was killed And then so basically in retaliation, other American riflemen went and marched basically to this little area, and they started attacking the British, and they actually killed or wounded many British, and in doing so, they only lost one American rifleman, as added to the original one. So, 30th of August, 1775, the British made a surprise, breakout. They sent, basically from here, and again, they set fire to basically now another building, and they turn around, head back. The same night, the Americans went to Lighthouse Island, which is another little island down here, and they burnt down the lighthouse, and they also captured 23 British soldiers, and they killed many British soldiers at the loss of one life. So again, the trend, the Americans are losing a lot less troops than the British are, which is about right. I'll get to that later. So, on September 11th, 1775, about 1,100 soldiers went up to Quebec, so that's out of the siege line. And again, I'll get to that, what that led to later on. So, November 1775, British soldiers went to this little point right here. Yep. It's like a little point with the arrow, I guess. And they basically went to go fight for some livestock again for fresh meat. They got I believe they got 10 cows at the loss of 2 British lives, and then the colonists again pushed them back to Boston. The 2nd of March, 1776, the Americans got cannons from Fort Ticonderoga. Again, I will be getting to that later, as stated before. And these were actually from a size and they actually had much more of a range than the Americans used before. So they basically put the cannons around the siege line again and started firing upon Boston. And then the British in Boston also responded with firing cannonballs at the Americans. So, March 5th, George Washington moved the cannons on Fort Ticonderoga that came down from the south, and he moved them all here at Dorchester Heights. And the immediate response of the British was like a 2-hour barrage of cannonballs. It was not much. The Americans were too high for the British cannons, so it didn't do much. And actually, it's interesting because then the Americans went to go and collect all these cannonballs and such. I think I said those 700 cannonballs that they collected and stored. And at the failure of basically the barrage, the British agreed that basically all the commanders, the higher ups of the British Army in Boston agreed that they should go and attack this hill, but bad weather basically didn't allow them to. So they decided to evacuate Boston. And then on March 15th, they couldn't leave in time before the winds that got too bad, so they had to wait till March 17th when the British got on boats and left. It was like 9,906 British troops and 120 ships, and there's like 11,000, and there's like 2,000 more civilians also on these ships. And then, so once the British left, the Americans sent in people who had been exposed to smallpox at the time, because smallpox was an issue in Boston during British occupation. So they sent those people who were immune to smallpox into Boston. As soon as the risk of the disease was low, then the Americans were able to head on to the Boston. Another thing is this Bunker Hill right here that was captured by the British, again, the Battle of Bunker Hill. I will get to that later. But they captured it and they left dummies in place. So then the Americans saw there were people actually up on the hill and they realized there wasn't. So they took back the hill. And then there's a few British boats. I thought it was a little interesting that they were sent from Great Britain to Boston because it takes, it took a really long time to get messages to and from Boston. And there's actually a boat or two that went into Boston and was instantly captured by the Americans because it was no longer the British ship. I'm sure that was a little bit of a surprise for them. But so the result, it was an American victory and the British retreated at Boston. So the Americans had anywhere between 7,000 and 16,000 people involved. 419 people, people were wounded or killed, and 30 members who were involved were captured. So that puts it between 2.6% and 5.9857% of all combatants from the Americans either wounded or killed. And for Great Britain, they had anywhere between 4,000 and 11,000 soldiers involved. 1,210 soldiers were either killed or wounded, and 35 soldiers were captured, and between 11% and 30% of combatants were either wounded or killed. There's a big drastic number between 2.6% on one end to 30% on another, and it gets crazy. But that will do it for my little 12-minute video on the Siege of Boston. Remember, like and subscribe. Till next time, y'all have a good one.